The night my marriage split in half began at 1:47 a.m. I remember the time because I was awake, staring at the blue glow under Adam's office door, listening to the low rhythm of his voice through the wall. He was on yet another late-night corporate strategy call, the kind that always made him sound colder than he was at home. Measured.
Polished.
Untouchable. We lived in a narrow brick townhouse in Seattle, the kind with too many stairs and not enough silence. At that hour, the whole place usually felt like a sleeping body. The heater hummed. The rain tapped softly against the windows. Somewhere in the kitchen, the ice maker knocked once inside the freezer like a tiny gunshot. Then my phone lit up on the nightstand.
Tara.
At first, I almost declined it. Tara never called this late unless she was drunk, heartbroken, or stranded somewhere dramatic. But the second I answered, I heard her breathing. Not crying. Panicking. "Brooke," she whispered. "Please tell me where Adam is." I sat up so fast the blanket slid to my waist. "What? Where is he?" she repeated, sharper this time. "Is he with you?" I turned toward the hallway, toward that strip of light under Adam's office door. "He's home. He's on a call."
Why?
There was a burst of noise on her end. Music, laughter, the clink of glasses, a trumpet dragging something slow and smoky through the background. Then she said, very clearly, "I just saw your husband walk into a rooftop jazz lounge in New Orleans with another woman." Everything inside me went still. Not shattered. Not exploded. Just stopped. "That's not possible," I said, and my voice came out strangely calm, as if it belonged to someone older and harder than me. "You're mistaken." "I am not mistaken." Tara lowered her voice again, but it only made her sound more frantic. "Brooke, I'm looking right at him. Camel overcoat. The one he wears every winter because he says nobody under 40 knows how to wear one right. And that watch, your anniversary gift. The dark blue dial." I swung my legs over the side of the bed. My feet touched the cold floor. Adam's camel overcoat was rare because he'd had it tailored in Milan during a conference 5 years earlier, and he treated it like it was more refined than the rest of humanity. The watch was even easier. I had spent 3 months hunting it down before our 10th anniversary because he had once paused in front of a jewelry display in Chicago and stared at it the way men stare at cars they intend to deserve later. "There are other camel coats," I said. "Not like this one. There are other watches." "Brooke." Her voice broke on my name. "I know your husband." The rain seemed louder then, or maybe it was the blood moving in my ears. I stood and crossed the bedroom, opening the door just enough to see the hall. The office door was still shut. Light still poured beneath it. Adam's voice still rose and fell in that steady executive cadence. I could even make out fragments now. Q4 positioning. A pause. No, that assumption doesn't hold. He was there. He had to be there. And yet Tara was not stupid. Not dramatic in this way. We had been friends since college, and she had a talent for noticing details other people stepped over. She used to catch professors wearing mismatched cufflinks from the back row of a lecture hall. She once identified my ex-boyfriend in a crowded ferry terminal from the shape of his shoulders alone. "You need to look again," I told her. "Maybe from the side. Maybe it's someone built like him." He just took her hand. My throat tightened. The silence between us stretched until she filled it with the words I didn't want. "She's beautiful, Brooke." That was the first thing that hurt. Not the possibility of cheating. Not even the lie. The image. A rooftop in New Orleans. Midnight air. Jazz pouring into the dark. My husband, who was supposed to be 15 feet away in his home office, reaching for another woman like he belonged beside her. "What does she look like?" I asked. Tara exhaled slowly, like she was forcing herself to stay useful.
"Tall.
Dark hair. Green dress. Not flashy, but expensive. The kind of woman who doesn't need to ask if she's being watched because she already knows she is." I pressed my fingers against the wall beside the door. It was cool and solid and real. I needed real. Tara listened to me carefully. "Adam is here." Then explained to me why I just watched him lean down and kiss her before they went inside. For 1 second, everything in my body betrayed me. My stomach dropped so violently, I thought I might be sick. My hands went numb. I could hear Adam speaking in the office, still calm, still composed, still exactly where he was supposed to be, and somehow that made it worse. Because if Tara was right, then I was not looking at an affair. I was looking at something impossible. Take a photo, I said. I already did. Send it. A few seconds later, my phone vibrated. I opened the message. The picture was grainy, taken from across a terrace washed in amber light. People blurred at the edges. A brass rail. A server carrying drinks. And in the center of it all, a man turning just enough for his profile to catch the light.
Camel overcoat.
Broad shoulders. That watch. My heart didn't break in that moment. It narrowed into something sharp. I lifted my eyes toward the office again. Adam was still inside, still talking, still performing his ordinary life with flawless precision. Tara, I said quietly, never taking my eyes off that door. Don't let him see you. Brooke. Stay where you are.
Keep your phone on.
And if he leaves, you tell me exactly who he leaves with. I ended the call before she could answer. Then I stood alone in the dark hallway of my own house, with my husband's voice on one side of the wall and his photograph in another city glowing in my hand. And for the first time in 11 years of marriage, I understood that fear does not always arrive screaming. Sometimes it steps softly into your life, dressed in cashmere and certainty, and waits for you to notice that the man you love may be standing in two places at once. I did not burst into Adam's office. That was the first decision I made, and maybe the most important. If I had been a louder woman, a Messier woman, I might have thrown open the door, shoved the photo in his face, and demanded an explanation while his colleagues listened through whatever expensive conference platform his firm used at ungodly hours. But I had spent too many years around powerful men to mistake emotion for leverage. So I stayed quiet. I stood in the hallway with my phone in one hand and Tara's photograph burning in my palm, and I listened to my husband speak in that dry, controlled tone he used whenever money was involved. He sounded exactly like himself. No strain, no rush, no trace of panic. That steadiness unsettled me more than anything. If he was guilty, he was calm enough to be dangerous. If he was innocent, then reality itself had started to slip. I went downstairs barefoot, careful on the steps, one hand brushing the wall for balance. The house felt too neat, too arranged. A white ceramic bowl still sat on the console table by the entryway, filled with Adam's keys, my sunglasses, and the folded receipt from a dry cleaner I kept meaning to throw away. His leather shoes were lined up on the mat by the door, both pairs exactly where they should be. I looked toward the coat closet. Slowly, like I was reaching toward a wound, I opened it. His camel overcoat was not there. I stared at the empty wooden hanger for a long second, then checked again as if it might materialize from embarrassment. Navy raincoat. Charcoal wool. My trench. An old puffer jacket he refused to admit he still owned. No camel coat. A strange chill moved over my skin. I pulled out my phone and opened the townhouse camera app. Adam had insisted on installing a full security system 2 years earlier after a break-in 2 streets over. He called it practical. I had called it excessive. That night, for the first time, I was grateful for every lens. I scrolled back through the entry camera footage. 11:08 p.m. Adam came in from the garage carrying his laptop bag and phone, still wearing his gray suit from the office. 11:11 p.m. He loosened his tie in the hallway and glanced at his screen. 11:14 p.m. He headed upstairs. After that, nothing. No front door opening. No garage. No side gate. No motion on the back terrace. I checked every angle twice, then a third time. The timestamps lined up. No gaps. No glitches I could see. If Adam had left the house, he had done it without touching a door, window, or sensor. Or he had never left at all. My pulse thudded harder. I switched to the interior camera we kept pointed at the lower stairwell during vacations. We usually disabled indoor recording when we were home, but Adam had reactivated part of the system during a recent package theft in the neighborhood and apparently forgotten to change it back. At 12:03 a.m., he came down halfway, holding a mug. At 12:05 a.m., he went back up. At 1:12 a.m., the office door opened just enough for him to step into the hall and ask if I wanted tea. I hadn't answered because I'd been half asleep then, still innocent enough to think my life was ordinary. Then he disappeared inside again. I closed the app and leaned against the kitchen counter. Every recorded detail supported his story before he had even told it. Home all night. Working. Visible. Accounted for. I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt the beginning of dread, because certainty and truth were no longer the same thing. My phone buzzed. Tara. He went inside. Private upstairs section. I can't get closer without being obvious. Then, a second message. Sending another photo. This one was worse. The angle was tighter, caught through a glass partition near the entrance. The man had turned slightly, one hand at the woman's waist, as he guided her forward. I could not see his full face, but I could see the coat, the watch, the shape of him, even the slight tilt of his head that Adam had whenever he was listening with selective patience. I zoomed in until the image blurred into light and shadow. Then I did something I had never done in all our marriage. I checked his messages. Adam was private, but not theatrical about it. No secret second phone. No dramatic face-down device at dinner. He guarded information the way other people guarded status. Quietly, constantly, as if discretion itself proved superiority. I knew his passcode because we had once promised each other total transparency, back when promises still felt like architecture instead of decoration. I unlocked his phone from the family tablet sync first, then his laptop from the kitchen desk. Messages. Email. Calendar. Everything was in order. A running thread with his executive team about merger modeling. Timestamp replies from him past midnight. An email draft opened at 1:31 a.m. Notes from a board prep call. A calendar hold labeled West Coast Strategy Review. Even his browser history matched the evening. Market reports, regional zoning summaries, financial forecasts. Nothing romantic. Nothing reckless. Nothing out of place. It was almost beautiful, the precision of it. I went back upstairs and paused outside the office. The door was still shut. Light still spilled underneath. His voice was lower now, confident and faint. I should have walked in. Instead, I opened the linen closet across the hall and waited for one of those instinctive pieces of memory to rise. Something small. Something overlooked. And then it came. Adam's home office had a secondary monitor mounted at an angle that never fully showed on camera unless you stood inside the room. During video calls, he always positioned himself in the same corner, bookshelf behind him, left side shadowed, ring light low. He said it was the most flattering setup. Carefully, I pushed his office door open an inch. He had his headset on. His back was partly to me. The screen glowed with a grid of faces and charts. He didn't turn. I looked down. On the floor beside the credenza sat his polished black dress shoes. But earlier, on the entryway camera, he had come home wearing brown loafers. My breath caught. I withdrew before he noticed and closed the door soundlessly. Then I went to our bedroom, opened his closet, and checked the shoe rack. The brown loafers were there,
Perfectly aligned.
as if they had been sitting there all night. I stood in the dark, surrounded by his tailored shirts and ordered life, and understood something for the first time. This was not just a suspicious photo. This was a performance. Every visible detail in my house supported Adam's innocence. The cameras, the messages, the office light, the voice on the call, the staged, immaculate trail of proof. And still, in Tara's photos, a man wearing my husband's rare coat and my anniversary watch was walking into a rooftop jazz lounge in New Orleans with a woman in green. I looked down at my shaking hands and forced them still. Because if there was one thing more frightening than catching a husband in a lie, it was realizing he had built the lie so well it could survive being examined. By the time the sun rose over Seattle, I had slept exactly 20 minutes. Adam was still in bed beside me, breathing slowly, one arm thrown loosely across his pillow like nothing in the world had shifted during the night. If I had not been awake for every second of it, I might have believed the same thing. He had ended his call around 2:30 a.m. I heard the office chair slide back. Heard the quiet footsteps in the hallway. He opened the bedroom door softly, the way he always did when he thought I was asleep. Then he climbed into bed beside me.
Warm. Real. Solid.
The man Tara swore she saw in New Orleans was apparently also asleep in my house by 2:37 a.m. I stared at the ceiling until morning. At 7, Adam kissed my shoulder and said, "You're up early." His voice was relaxed, almost cheerful in that restrained executive way of his. The tone of a man who had nothing to hide and no reason to check if his wife had been awake all night studying the architecture of his lies.
Couldn't sleep, I said.
Too much rain. That small comment almost made me laugh. Seattle had rain 200 days a year, and it had never once kept him awake before.
He showered, dressed,
drank coffee while skimming emails on his phone. Every movement was efficient and predictable. The same routine I had watched for 11 years. No hesitation. No nervous glance. No hidden tension. By the time he left for the office, I had learned nothing new, but the question had grown teeth. After he drove away, I sat at the kitchen table with Tara's photos open again and forced myself to think like someone solving a problem instead of someone nursing a wound. There were only two possibilities. Either Tara had made a mistake, or the man she saw only looked like Adam. The second option sounded ridiculous at first. Adam was tall, 6'2", with a very particular posture he developed from years of boardrooms and private schools. Shoulders straight, chin slightly lifted, as if the air around him existed for negotiation. But the more I stared at the photo, the more my mind reached for comparisons. There were men who shared pieces of him. The first name that surfaced was Luke, Adam's younger cousin. Luke had always been the family shadow, 3 years younger, the same dark hair, almost the same height. When they stood beside each other at weddings or holidays, distant relatives sometimes confused them from across a room. But Luke's resemblance stopped at a distance. Up close, he was looser, softer around the edges. Where Adam moved with careful precision, Luke carried himself like someone who had never needed to command attention because he was happy drifting beside it. Still, from the right angle, in the right coat, I opened my contacts and scrolled to Luke's number, then paused. Luke lived in Portland, 2.5 hours away. He worked for a landscape architecture firm and spent most of his free time rock climbing or driving somewhere remote enough to forget cell service existed. New Orleans was not his style. But logic had already taken a beating that night. I texted him. Random question. Are you in Oregon right now? The reply came 5 minutes later.
Yep. Why?
I hesitated, then typed.
Just checking something.
When was the last time you saw Adam? A typing bubble appeared. Last Thanksgiving? Unless you count the group chat. Everything okay? I stared at the screen for a long time before answering. Yeah. Just curious. Luke was out, which left the other name my mind kept circling. Owen. If Luke was Adam's shadow growing up, Owen was his mirror in adulthood. They met during Adam's first year at the firm, back when both of them were junior analysts surviving on caffeine and ambition. Owen had the same build, same height, same calm, observant demeanor that made people underestimate how much he was actually absorbing. At company parties, people occasionally mistook them from behind. More than once I had walked into a crowded reception and approached Owen by accident before realizing my mistake. But Owen didn't dress like Adam. Adam was precise. Tailored suits, muted colors, expensive restraint. Owen leaned looser. Jacket slightly rumpled. No watch half the time. His hair never quite obeying gravity. And yet, I opened Tara's second photo again and zoomed in on the man's profile. The jawline was close enough. The shoulders were right, but something about the way he leaned toward the woman felt more relaxed than Adam usually allowed himself in public. Could Owen have borrowed the coat? The thought felt strange even inside my own head. Adam guarded his clothes the way other men guarded secrets. Still, Owen traveled constantly for the firm's development projects. If anyone in Adam's circle might randomly appear in New Orleans, it would be him. I opened Owen's social media. The latest photo was from 3 days earlier, a rooftop bar somewhere in Dallas. Owen smiling beside a group of investors with a whiskey glass in his hand. His caption read, Back on the road again. No location tag after that. No posts from the last 24 hours. I leaned back in my chair and rubbed my temples. If the man in Tara's photo was Owen, then the mystery ended with a simple explanation, a coincidence of coats and watches and dim rooftop lighting. But if it was Adam, then my husband had somehow managed to appear in Louisiana while simultaneously conducting a video call from his office in Seattle. And the more I replayed the night in my mind, the more one detail kept pulling at me. The camera angles. Adam had been very careful about them. Careful enough that none of us on the outside of that office could see exactly what was happening inside it. I looked again at the photo of the man in the camel coat, his hand resting lightly at the waist of the woman in green. Then I whispered something to the empty kitchen that I hadn't yet admitted even to myself. "Owen," I said slowly. "If that was you," I let the sentence fade. Because the truth was, another thought had already started forming behind it. If that was Owen, then someone had been sitting in Adam's office while Adam was somewhere else. By noon, I knew I couldn't stay in Seattle. Suspicion has a strange way of growing when it's trapped inside walls. Every room in the townhouse felt like it belonged to Adam's version of reality. His cameras, his office, his careful systems that said he had been home all night. If I wanted the truth, I had to go where the lies started. New Orleans. I didn't tell Adam. Instead, I texted him at 12:14 p.m. "Lunch with Claire. Might stay out a while." His reply came almost instantly.
Enjoy.
"Long day here. No questions. No curiosity. Just the quiet confidence of a man who believed his world was perfectly under control." That message hardened something inside me. I booked the first flight south. The airport felt unreal, like I had stepped into someone else's story. Families pulling suitcases. Business travelers glued to laptops. A couple arguing quietly near the security line about whose turn it was to watch the dog. Meanwhile, I kept replaying Tara's voice in my head.
Camel overcoat.
That watch. He kissed her. The plane left Seattle under a low gray ceiling of clouds. For 3 hours, I stared out the window while the country slid beneath us in long strips of rivers and fields. I wasn't thinking about divorce. I wasn't even thinking about revenge. I was thinking about mechanics. How could a man appear in 2 cities at the same time? Every explanation led back to the same unsettling possibility. Someone had helped him.
Owen.
The thought kept circling back. If Owen had been in Adam's office during that call, wearing his clothes, sitting in the right chair, speaking at the right moments, it could explain everything the cameras showed. But that only raised a bigger question.
Why?
And what exactly had Adam been doing in New Orleans that required such an elaborate illusion? The plane landed just after 6 in the evening. The air hit me the second I stepped outside the terminal, thick, warm, and carrying that faint scent of river water and old brick that makes the city feel older than the rest of the country. Tara was waiting near the pickup lane. The moment she saw me, she pulled me into a tight hug. "I still can't believe you flew here," she said. "I had to." She leaned back and studied my face. "You look terrifyingly calm." "I feel terrifyingly calm." That wasn't entirely true. Somewhere underneath the calm, something raw and shaking still existed. But years of marriage to Adam had taught me one useful skill.
Control.
Tara drove us toward the French Quarter while the sky darkened into deep purple above the river. Street musicians were already filling the sidewalks. Saxophones.
Trumpets.
That lazy New Orleans rhythm that made everything feel slightly unreal. "The lounge is up ahead," she said after a few minutes. We turned onto a narrow street lined with old balconies and glowing lanterns. The building itself didn't look like much from the outside. Just another restored brick structure with soft gold light spilling from tall windows. But when Tara pointed upward, I saw the rooftop terrace.
"That's where I was sitting," she said.
"Right there." We parked and walked toward the entrance. My pulse quickened with every step. The host inside barely glanced at us before gesturing toward the elevator that led upstairs. The doors opened with a quiet ding, and a moment later we stepped out into warm air and slow jazz drifting through the night. It was almost exactly how Tara's photos had looked. Small candlelit tables. A polished bar along one wall. The Mississippi stretching dark and wide beyond the terrace railing. I stood there for a moment, imagining Adam walking through this same space. Where were they? I asked. Tara guided me across the terrace and stopped near a corner table. Right here, she said quietly. I looked down at the chair, then toward the entrance where he would have appeared. Show me, I said. She pulled out her phone and replayed the moment for me. I was sitting over there, she said, pointing toward the opposite side of the terrace. They came up the stairs together. He had his hand here. She touched her own waist to demonstrate. And then, I asked. They went inside for a minute. I followed just enough to get another picture. Did you hear them speak? No. Did he look at you? Not once. I turned slowly, studying every angle of the terrace. If Adam had been here, he would have arrived confidently. He never moved like a man worried about being recognized. And that confidence suggested something else. He believed no one who knew him would be here. Did they leave together? I asked. Tara hesitated. That's the weird part. My stomach tightened. What do you mean? I stayed for another hour, she said. I never saw them come back out. I frowned. There's only one exit. That's what I thought too, she said. But then she pointed across the terrace, toward a narrow service door half hidden behind a tall potted palm. The manager used that a few times bringing supplies up, Tara said, and once a couple left through it. I followed her gaze. The door looked ordinary, almost forgettable, but something about it made the air feel colder. Because if Adam had walked out that way, he hadn't just been visiting a jazz lounge. He had been disappearing into the city. And somewhere beyond that door, the real story of last night was still waiting. The next morning, New Orleans felt softer. Sunlight spilled across the narrow streets, turning the old brick buildings golden. Musicians were already setting up near the corners, warming up their instruments like the city itself was stretching awake. I barely noticed any of it. I was staring at the name on my phone. Owen Harper. Tara sat across from me at a small breakfast cafe near the river, stirring her coffee while watching my face. You're really going to call him? She asked. Yes. And just ask. I'm not accusing anyone yet. That wasn't entirely true. But accusations without proof only warn the person you're trying to catch. I pressed the call button. It rang twice. Owen. His voice was smooth, slightly amused, the way it always sounded when he answered unexpected calls. Like he assumed anything surprising was probably entertaining.
Hi, I said.
It's Brooke. Brooke Carter calling me before 9 in the morning, he said lightly. Adam finally send you to audit my life? Something about the casual joke made my stomach tighten. Where are you right now? I asked. There was the smallest pause. Dallas yesterday, he said. Why? I looked directly at Tara. Are you in New Orleans today? Another pause. Longer this time. Then he laughed. Well, that depends how specific we're being. I felt Tara stiffen across the table. Owen, I said calmly, were you at a rooftop jazz lounge here last night? The line went quiet. Not the confused quiet of someone searching their memory. The careful quiet of someone deciding what to say. Finally, he exhaled. Yes. The answer landed like a stone. Were you wearing a camel overcoat? I asked. Possibly. And Adam's watch? This time his laugh came faster, but it sounded forced. Okay, he said. Now I'm curious how this conversation started. Tara saw you. I said simply. Another pause. Right, he said slowly. That makes more sense. I leaned back in my chair. So, it was you. I assumed she thought I was Adam. Yes. Well, he said lightly, that's flattering. My eyes moved to the river beyond the cafe windows. Brown water sliding past ancient docks. Who was the woman? I asked. A business contact. Name? That's not really my information to share. His tone had shifted slightly, still smooth, but guarded now. What kind of business meeting happens at midnight on a rooftop jazz lounge? I asked. The kind that involves investors who prefer jazz lounges. Tara's eyebrows lifted. Owen, I said quietly. Did you borrow Adam's coat? He hesitated again. For a minute, he admitted. It was cold. And the watch. That part's a coincidence. I closed my eyes briefly. The explanation was almost believable. Almost tidy enough to close the entire mystery. Except for one thing. You were in Seattle yesterday morning, I said. Yes. And Adam was home last night. Yes. So, when exactly did you fly to New Orleans? Yesterday afternoon. Adam knew. Yes. Why didn't he mention it? He probably forgot. I opened my eyes again. Owen Harper was many things. Charming, observant, occasionally reckless. But he was not sloppy. The way he answered questions now sounded like someone walking across a frozen lake, testing each step before putting down weight. Did you go inside the lounge? I asked. Yes. With a woman? Yes. And then, we talked. For how long? An hour or so. Did anyone else join you? No. Did Adam call you last night? That question finally cracked something in his rhythm.
No.
The word came too quickly. Did you speak to him at all yesterday evening? Another pause. Then Owen said something that should have reassured me. Brooke, he said gently, you're overthinking this. I watched a barge move slowly downriver. Am I? Yes. You wore Adam's coat. For 10 minutes. You were mistaken for him. Apparently. You had a private dinner with a woman you won't name. Professional courtesy. And you expect me to believe none of that has anything to do with my husband. Owen sighed softly. I expect you to trust Adam. The way he said it made something cold slide through my chest. Because Owen didn't sound like a man defending a friend. He sounded like a man reciting a line. Who is she? I asked again. Brooke. The woman. Silence stretched across the line. Then he said very carefully, she's involved in a real estate restoration project here. That's all I can say. Is Adam part of the project?
No.
Another answer too quick. Owen. Yes. If I ask around in the city today, am I going to find your story holds up?
His voice softened again.
You'll find exactly what I told you. That was the moment I knew something was wrong. Not because of what he said, but because Owen Harper had always enjoyed telling the truth in ways that made people uncomfortable. Today, every word sounded polished, prepared, like he had already rehearsed this conversation long before my phone ever rang. Thank you for the explanation, I said finally. Anytime, he replied. We ended the call. Tara leaned forward immediately. Well, he says it was him. And you believe him? I stared at the phone in my hand. No. Because Owen had given me answers. But he had also done something far more revealing. He had tried very hard to make the story end right there. Owen's explanation should have ended the investigation. That was clearly the role it was meant to play. A neat, believable solution. A mistaken identity. A borrowed coat. A quiet business dinner. Case closed. Except nothing about it felt closed. After breakfast, Tara and I walked along the river while the city warmed around us. Streetcars rattled past. A saxophone drifted through the humid air from somewhere deeper in the quarter. I kept replaying Owen's voice in my head. Every pause. Every polished sentence. Brooke, Tara said finally. If he admitted he was there, maybe that really is the answer. Maybe. You don't sound convinced. I'm not. Why? I stopped walking. Across the river, a cargo ship moved slowly through the brown water, heavy and patient. Watching it made my thoughts settle into something sharper. Because Owen didn't behave like Owen, I said. What do you mean? He's usually relaxed when he tells the truth, I said. Today he sounded like someone carefully choosing each word. Tara folded her arms. Maybe because he was talking to his best friend's suspicious wife. Maybe. But another thought had already begun to surface. Owen said the woman was part of a restoration project here. I continued.
Yeah.
That means there will be records. Tara blinked. You're serious? Yes. She stared at me for a moment, then smiled slowly. You're going full investigator now. I'm going to find out who she is. It took less time than I expected. New Orleans is a city where old buildings constantly change hands, and restoration projects are practically a local sport. Within an hour, we had a list of the most recent high-end property renovations along the riverfront. One name kept appearing: Riviere House Project, a historic mansion overlooking the Mississippi, recently purchased by a private development partnership. The renovation had already been mentioned in 2 local business articles. One partner was listed immediately: Owen Harper. Tara leaned closer to my laptop screen. "Well," she said, "that part of his story checks out." "Yes." But there was another partner listed beneath his name. A second investor. A woman. I stared at the name for a long moment before reading it out loud. Vanessa Cole. Tara frowned. "Does that mean anything to you?" For a second, it didn't. Then something shifted in my memory. A conference ballroom in Chicago. A company holiday dinner 2 years earlier. A younger executive standing near the end of the table while Adam introduced his team to a group of investors. Dark hair. Sharp eyes. Confident smile. "Wait," I said slowly. I opened another tab and searched her name. Her professional photo appeared almost immediately, and my stomach dropped. There she was. Vanessa Cole, Vice President of Strategic Acquisitions at Adam's firm. 32 years old, rapidly rising through the company, and wearing an emerald green dress in the profile photo taken at some corporate gala 6 months earlier. Tara leaned closer. "Is that?" "Yes." "That's the woman?" I didn't answer right away, because suddenly Tara's description from the night before replayed perfectly in my mind.
Tall.
Dark hair. Green dress. The kind of woman who knows she's being watched. The same woman now staring back at me from the screen, working directly under my husband, investing in property projects with his closest friend, and appearing in the exact city where Adam had apparently been seen the night before. Tara sat back slowly. "That's a lot of coincidence." "Yes." "You think Adam introduced them?" "Probably." "You think he knows about the project?" "I'm certain." Tara looked at me carefully. "Do you think he knows she was there last night?" That question hung between us for a long moment, because if Owen's story were true, then Vanessa had simply been having dinner with a business partner. But if Tara had been right, if the man she saw was actually Adam, then my husband hadn't just been cheating. He had been cheating with a woman who worked inside his own company. A woman who had quietly invested in a secret property project with his best friend, and who had somehow ended up at a rooftop jazz lounge in New Orleans on the exact night Adam had the most perfect alibi of his entire life. I closed the laptop slowly. The city noise around us suddenly felt distant. "Owen said they talked for an hour," Tara said. "Yes." "And then?" "He didn't say." What if we find her? The idea landed immediately. Vanessa Cole was not a mysterious stranger in a jazz lounge anymore. She was a corporate executive with a public career, a documented investment, and a face that now existed very clearly in my mind. People like that left trails. Hotels. Meetings. Property visits. Reservations. And somewhere in the city, she had spent last night with someone wearing my husband's coat. I stood up from the table. "Where are you going?" Tara asked. "To find out where Vanessa Cole is staying. And then I slip my phone into my bag. Then we find out who she spent the night with." We found Vanessa's hotel faster than I expected. People who live inside executive schedules develop habits. They choose predictable places. Quiet luxury. Reliable discretion. Vanessa Cole had checked into the Maison Riviere Hotel, a restored riverside property barely 10 minutes from the Jazz Lounge. The front desk confirmed it without realizing they had done anything wrong. Tara simply asked if Miss Cole from the Riviere Restoration Project was still staying there. The clerk smiled politely and said she had checked out early that morning. My pulse quickened. "Did she leave alone?" Tara asked. The clerk hesitated. "I'm not sure," he said. "There was a car waiting." That answer wasn't useful enough to be proof, but it was enough to keep the questions alive. By mid-afternoon, exhaustion began pressing behind my eyes. We had been walking through the city for hours, retracing routes between the hotel, the lounge, and the riverside streets where wealthy investors tended to disappear behind gated courtyards. And still nothing concrete had appeared. Just fragments. Vanessa here. Owen invested there. Adam somehow existing in two cities at once. By evening we ended up back near the Jazz Lounge, sitting at a quiet bar across the street while the sky turned dark again. Tara checked her phone. "You're sure you want to keep pushing this tonight?" "Yes." "You haven't slept." "I'll sleep when the story makes sense." She studied me for a moment. "You're scaring me a little." "I'm scaring myself a little." At that moment my phone vibrated. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. Then a message appeared. "You're asking the wrong questions." My body went still. Tara noticed immediately. "What is it?" I turned the phone so she could read. Another message appeared before either of us spoke. "If you want the truth about your husband, come alone." The air around the bar suddenly felt heavier. Tara leaned closer. "Okay, that's creepy." I typed carefully. "Who is this?" The reply came instantly. "Someone who watched him last night." My heartbeat quickened. "Where?" There was a long pause this time. Then a final message arrived. "Old River Observatory. Outside the city. Midnight. Come alone if you actually want answers." Below the text was a dropped map pin. Tara grabbed my wrist. "Absolutely not. I have to go." "No," she said immediately. "That's how people end up in documentaries." I stared at the location on the screen. The abandoned observatory sat along a quiet stretch of river about 20 minutes outside the city. A crumbling structure that used to track river traffic decades ago before modern systems replaced it. Whoever sent the message clearly knew I was investigating, and knew enough about Adam to assume I wouldn't stop. "Tara," I said quietly, "someone there claims they saw him. Or someone wants to scare you. Either way, they know something." She rubbed her temples. "I hate this." "I do too." Midnight came faster than either of us wanted. The road to the observatory was dark and nearly empty. Old oak trees leaned over the narrow pavement like silent witnesses. I parked 100 yards away. "You're not going alone," Tara said. "Yes, I am." "No chance. If this person thinks I ignore the instructions, they might leave." Tara swore under her breath, but finally nodded. "I'll stay in the car," she said. "But if you scream, I'm running in with a tire iron." "That's fair." The observatory stood at the edge of the river like a forgotten watchtower. Its windows were dark, paint peeling from old wooden siding. The wind off the water carried the smell of mud and salt. I walked toward the entrance slowly. "Hello," I called. For a moment there was nothing but the sound of water moving past the rocks below. Then a voice came from inside. "You came." A woman stepped into the doorway. She looked to be in her early 40s, with dark curls pulled back and the confident posture of someone used to managing busy rooms. "I'm Brooke," I said carefully. "I know. Who are you?" "Nina," she replied. "I manage the lounge." My pulse quickened. "The rooftop jazz club?" "Yes." "You said you saw my husband." Nina studied my face for a long moment. "I saw the man Tara photographed, and..." Her expression turned serious. "And I've seen Owen Harper before." My stomach tightened. "So it was him?" She shook her head slowly. "No." The word echoed quietly in the empty observatory. "That man last night wasn't Owen." Cold spread through my chest. "Then who was it?" Nina stepped closer, her voice lowering. "I only realized after your friend showed the photo around the bar." "Realized what?" "That the man she thought was Owen Harper," she said carefully, "was actually Adam Carter." The river wind howled softly through the broken windows behind her. For a moment, I couldn't speak, because the one explanation that could have kept my world stable had just collapsed. Nina watched my face closely. "There's something else," she said. My voice barely came out. "What?" "The man who left through the service door with Vanessa Cole," she continued quietly, "had a private car waiting. And..." Nina met my eyes. "He didn't go back to the hotel." My pulse thundered in my ears. "Where did he go?" She hesitated. Then she said the one thing I wasn't prepared to hear. "He went to a private airstrip." For a few seconds after Nina said the words, I simply stood there. A private airstrip. The river wind pushed through the broken observatory windows, carrying the smell of damp wood and dark water. Somewhere behind me, I heard Tara's car door creak slightly as she shifted in the driver's seat, probably trying to see if I was still alive. But all my attention stayed on Nina. You're sure? I asked. Yes. How could you possibly know that? She folded her arms and leaned lightly against the old railing. Because the car belonged to a private aviation service, she said. The driver comes into the lounge sometimes when he's waiting on clients. I recognized him. My mind started moving again.
Fast.
What time did they leave? About 1:20 a.m. My chest tightened. That meant Adam would have needed to leave New Orleans almost immediately after Tara saw him. The timing would have been impossible for a normal traveler. But Adam Carter never liked normal logistics. Did they seem close? I asked. Nina gave me a look that answered the question before she spoke. Yes. Not just business. Not just coincidence. Something older. Familiar. How long had they been there? I asked. Maybe 40 minutes. And you're certain it was Adam? Yes. The certainty in her voice felt like a quiet blade sliding between my ribs. Why message me? I asked. Because your friend started asking questions last night, Nina said. And because men like your husband usually assume nobody in rooms like mine is paying attention. She gestured toward the river. But people who run places like that notice everything. I swallowed slowly. You said Owen wasn't the man. No. Are you absolutely sure? I've served Owen drinks before, she said. He stands differently. Looser shoulders. She mimicked the posture briefly. The man last night stood like this. Her spine straightened slightly. Chin angled upward. Adam's posture. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Then how did he appear on a video call in Seattle at the same time? Nina watched me carefully. That part, she said quietly. I think you already know. And suddenly all the pieces I'd been circling since yesterday locked into place. Owen's careful answers. Adam's perfect camera angles. The coat missing from a closet. The shoes switched. The office door always closed. Someone had been inside that room. Someone built like Adam. Someone who could fool a camera if the angles were right. Owen, I whispered. Nina didn't respond, but her silence confirmed enough. I turned away and walked toward the broken window, staring out over the dark water. Adam hadn't just cheated. He had engineered the lie.
Carefully.
Deliberately. The entire night had been staged. Owen in the office. Wearing Adam's clothes. Sitting in his chair. Answering when necessary during the call. Just enough to keep the illusion alive. Meanwhile, Adam flew across the country to meet Vanessa Cole under the warm lights of a rooftop jazz lounge.
2 men.
One identity. A manufactured double. Behind me, Nina spoke again. There's more. I turned slowly. What? She reached into her bag and pulled out a small envelope. Inside were printed photos. Security stills. The rooftop entrance. The service corridor. The rear exit. In one of the images, Adam and Vanessa stood close together beneath a dim light. His hand rested confidently at the small of her back. I felt the final thread of denial snap. How long have you had these? I asked. Since last night. Why keep them? Because when a man organizes a fake alibi that complicated, Nina said quietly, it usually means he's hiding more than just one evening. The observatory creaked softly in the wind. I studied the photos again. Adam looked completely relaxed. Comfortable. Like a man who had done this before. My voice came out steady. Did they say anything while they were there? Nina hesitated. Then she nodded slowly. I only caught part of one conversation, she said. What part? Nina looked directly into my eyes. She told him she was tired of hiding. My pulse slowed. And what did he say? Nina's answer came quietly. He told her not to worry. A long pause filled the room. Because soon, she finished, everything would belong to them anyway. I didn't cry. That surprised me later, but not in the moment. Standing in that broken observatory with Nina's photos in my hands, something inside me shifted from pain to clarity. It felt almost physical, like a door closing somewhere deep in my chest. Adam had built a system.
Not just a lie.
A system. Owen sitting in the office, wearing Adam's clothes. The camera angles. The late-night strategy call timed perfectly so nobody would question why he stayed inside that room for hours. The code.
The watch.
The private flight. That wasn't improvisation. That was rehearsal. How long? I asked quietly. Nina watched me carefully. You mean with Vanessa? Yes. I don't know exactly, she said. But long enough that they looked comfortable. Comfortable. The word echoed in my head like something hollow. She reached into her bag again. There's something else you should see. She handed me a thin folder. Inside were printed screenshots, emails, payment confirmations, and what looked like copied message threads. My pulse slowed as I started reading. At first it was confusing. Random numbers. Transfers between shell accounts. Private aviation invoices. Then the pattern began to appear.
Flights.
Seattle. Chicago. Miami. Dallas. New Orleans. The same travel company. The same billing contact. Vanessa Cole. But the passenger name on many of the flights was different. Not Adam Carter. Instead, they used short corporate travel codes, initials, project names, vague references that could easily be hidden in business expense reports. I turned another page. Hotel bookings. Private apartments. Luxury rentals in multiple cities. All arranged through the same assistant at Adam's firm. My stomach tightened. This hadn't started last night. This had been happening for years. There are more women, Nina said quietly. I looked up.
What?
Not always the same one. The air in the observatory seemed to thin. Vanessa is the longest relationship, she continued. But I've seen different names attached to those payments. I flipped further into the folder. There they were. Different cities. Different names. Sometimes only initials. Sometimes full reservations. Each one tied to travel Adam had supposedly been doing for business. Trips where I stayed home. Trips where he called late from hotel rooms and told me how much he missed me. Trips where he promised that once the next project closed, life would slow down. I closed the folder slowly. The anger that rose inside me wasn't explosive. It was colder.
Precise.
Why give this to me? I asked. Nina leaned against the railing again. Because men like him assume nobody connects the details, she said. And you did. I manage a lounge where wealthy people meet quietly, she said. Patterns become obvious. I looked down at the final page in the folder. A message exchanged between Adam and Vanessa.
Short.
Simple. Vanessa, she still doesn't know? Adam, no. Vanessa, and when the merger closes. Adam. Then everything changes. My hands stopped shaking. Not because the betrayal hurt less, but because the shape of the truth was finally clear. This wasn't just about an affair. Adam had been planning something bigger. Something tied to the massive real estate merger he had been working on for the last year. The deal he talked about constantly, the one he claimed would define the rest of his career. The deal that required my signature on several shared asset documents last month. I felt a quiet realization settle into place. He hadn't just been hiding women. He had been preparing to replace me. Eventually.
Cleanly.
Quietly. I looked at Nina. Does anyone else know about this?
No.
And Owen? She shrugged slightly. I assume he knows enough to help your husband. Of course he did. The perfect friend. The perfect double. The man who sat in Adam's office pretending to be him while my husband kissed another woman 3,000 miles away. I slipped the folder into my bag. What will you do now? Nina asked. I thought about Adam sleeping peacefully beside me the night before. About his calm smile at breakfast. About the casual text telling me to enjoy lunch while he spent the day in meetings. Then I pictured the massive press event he had been preparing for. The public launch of the Chicago merger next month. Investors. Reporters. Board members. A billion-dollar deal that depended on Adam Carter's flawless reputation. I felt the calm settle deeper. I'm going home, I said. Nina raised an eyebrow. That's it. For now. And Adam? I met her eyes. He thinks I know nothing. The wind outside pushed against the old structure again. Good, Nina said quietly. I turned toward the door. Because the most important phase of the story was only beginning. Adam believed he had designed the perfect deception. What he didn't know yet was that I had already started designing the end of it. For the next 4 weeks, I played the role of the perfect wife. It wasn't difficult. Adam never suspected that anything had changed. If anything, he seemed calmer than usual, more confident, the way he always became when a deal was close to closing. The Chicago merger was everything to him. A billion-dollar real estate consolidation that would place his firm at the center of half a dozen major redevelopment projects across the country. Adam had spent 2 years building the negotiations, shaping the investors, controlling every piece of the narrative. And the public announcement was going to be enormous. Investors, board members, financial media. A ballroom full of people who believed Adam Carter was one of the most disciplined executives in the industry. At home, I watched him prepare. Late nights, conference calls, perfectly rehearsed presentations. Sometimes he even practiced the speech aloud in his office. The future of urban development requires vision, he would say, pacing slowly in front of the screen. Vision. That word almost made me smile. Because while he was polishing his speech, I was building something far more precise. I met with a lawyer 3 days after returning to Seattle. Not the corporate attorney Adam knew. A divorce attorney who specialized in financial deception. I handed her Nina's folder. By the time she finished reviewing the documents, her expression had turned quietly impressed. Your husband has been very busy, she said. Yes. And careless, she added. That part surprised me. Careless. Men like him believe complexity protects them, she explained. But complexity creates records. Over the next weeks, we collected everything. Private flight manifests, financial transfers between Adam's shell accounts, property investments tied to Vanessa Cole, messages recovered from company devices, travel reimbursements that suddenly made perfect sense once the hidden flights were mapped beside them. Even Owen's role began to appear in the records. Expense reimbursements, calendar overlaps, subtle details that showed he had been sitting in Adam's office more than once. It wasn't just one night. It had been happening for months, maybe longer. By the time the Chicago event arrived, the evidence filled 2 clean legal binders. Adam never noticed anything. In fact, the morning of the announcement, he kissed my cheek in the hotel suite and said something almost sweet. I'm glad you're here today. Of course I am. You've supported this deal from the beginning. I smiled. I wouldn't miss it. The ballroom at the Chicago Conference Center was packed. Rows of investors, journalists adjusting cameras, board members sitting at reserved tables near the stage. Adam loved rooms like this. Rooms where people waited for him to speak. He stepped onto the stage with the same controlled confidence I had watched for 11 years. Perfect suit. Perfect posture. Perfect smile. Good afternoon, he began. Applause rolled through the room. Behind him, a giant screen displayed the title slide of the merger announcement. The future of American urban development. He spoke for 20 minutes.
Clear. Calm.
Convincing. Every sentence designed to reinforce the image he had spent his entire career building. Then he reached the final section. The success of this partnership, Adam said smoothly, has been built on trust. That was my cue. I stood. At first, no one noticed. A few people near the aisle turned slightly confused. Adam's eyes found me halfway through his next sentence. For the first time in our marriage, he looked uncertain. Brooke, he said. I walked toward the stage slowly. The room had gone completely silent now. Adam tried to recover his composure. Ladies and gentlemen, he said lightly, it seems my wife has decided to join me. A few polite laughs rippled through the audience. I stepped beside him and took the microphone from the podium. Adam leaned closer, his voice low. What are you doing? I looked out at the crowd. Investors, reporters, board members. Exactly the audience he had wanted. I'm correcting a small detail in Adam's presentation. I said calmly. A technician behind the stage hesitated. Next slide, I told him. The giant screen behind us changed. Instead of merger projections, a photograph appeared. The rooftop jazz lounge. Adam in the camel overcoat. Vanessa Cole in her emerald dress. His hand at her waist. A wave of murmurs moved through the ballroom. Adam's face went pale. "What is this?" he whispered. "Oh," I said softly, "that's New Orleans." The next slide appeared. Private flight records. Then another. Messages between Adam and Vanessa. Another. Expense reports linking Owen to the staged alibi. Each image appeared cleanly on the massive screen behind us. The room filled with rising voices. Cameras lifted. Phones recording. Adam grabbed my arm. "Turn that off," he hissed. I pulled away gently. "You said this deal was built on trust." Another slide appeared. Adam's message to Vanessa. "Soon everything will belong to us anyway." Gasps echoed across the ballroom. Adam turned toward the audience, trying desperately to speak. But for the first time in his life, he had lost control of the room. Board members were already whispering. Investors staring at the evidence. Reporters raising microphones. His carefully constructed reputation was collapsing in real time. I leaned slightly toward him and spoke quietly enough that only he could hear. "You should have chosen a smaller lie." His voice cracked. "You don't understand what you're doing." I stepped back and handed the microphone to one of the stunned board members. "Oh," I said calmly. "I understand perfectly." Then I walked off the stage. The divorce was finalized 4 months later. Adam lost the merger, lost his position at the firm, lost most of the reputation he had spent 20 years building. The last time I saw him was outside the courthouse. He looked smaller, not physically, just diminished, like a man who had finally realized the world could see him clearly.
He tried to speak.
But I didn't stop walking, because in the end, I hadn't destroyed Adam Carter. He had simply spent years building a lie so elaborate that all I had to do was turn on the lights.